Welcome everyone to today's Explainer. Now, when you hear the name Antoni Gaudí, you probably immediately picture these quirky, colorful, almost melting buildings. But I really want to challenge that perception right away. Gaudí wasn't just some quirky aesthetic designer. He was an absolute visionary, a structural genius. And throughout this Explainer, we're going to see exactly how his intense, scientific pursuit of nature literally reshaped the entire skyline of Barcelona. Okay, let's dive into this roadmap. We'll start with nature as the ultimate architect, move into engineering the organic form, and then reviving the Catalan identity. After that, we'll take a look at Barcelona's living masterpieces, and finally, wrap up with the divine blueprint.
Let's myth bust immediately. On the left here, we have classical architecture, which, as you probably know, relied heavily on semicircular arches, monolithic load-bearing walls, and very rigid mathematical geometry. But look over at Gaudí's organic architecture on the right. He completely threw out the classical rulebook. Instead, he favored catenary curves, branching tree columns, and fluid biomimicry. And this wasn't just him being eccentric, right? His style was an incredibly empirical, scientific pursuit of true structural efficiency.
So, Section 1. Nature as the ultimate architect. Gaudí deeply believed that nature was a divine blueprint. So let's start with a sort of micro to macro zoom here. His approach was incredibly hands-on. He spent hours out in the Catalan countryside just sketching trees, geological formations, and rocks. He rigorously analyzed branching tree structures to figure out exactly how they distributed heavy loads. He even documented the helical forms of shells and the skeletal structures of animals. He would iterate his designs fluidly, basing them entirely on the functional integrity of living organisms. So he wasn't just copying how nature looked, he was copying how nature actually worked.
Moving right along to Section 2. Engineering the organic form.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how he actually translated that biology into heavy stone buildings. It all comes down to the sheer genius of this hanging chain model. Step 1, he'd suspend flexible chains weighted with tiny bags of sand or birdshot from support points on the ceiling. Step 2, he'd just let gravity pull those chains down into a natural, perfect catenary curve. And step 3, he'd place a mirror underneath or invert the shape on paper to design these perfectly distributed compressive arches. He literally turned gravity into his most powerful architectural tool.
And he definitely didn't stop at arches. He pushed into some highly advanced structural concepts. Take hyperbolic paraboloids, for example. These are doubly curved, saddle-like surfaces that create incredibly dynamic, strong roofs. Then you've got his famous tree columns. If you think of a dense forest canopy, that's exactly what he was doing. Instead of massive, thick walls holding up a heavy roof, Gaudí used these bifurcating, branching pillars to distribute vertical loads to multiple points, which just completely eliminated the need for heavy internal supports. Plus, he pioneered the use of reinforced concrete, effortlessly blending novel industrial materials right into these biological forms.
Let's look at Section 3, Reviving the Catalan Identity.
Architecture isn't just about math and gravity, It's about soul. And Gaudí's work was deeply tied to the Renaissance movement, which was this powerful cultural wave celebrating Catalan heritage and nationalism. But he didn't just slavishly copy history, he reinterpreted it. Where he saw Romanesque stonework, he embraced its robust structural integrity but looked at it through a really modern lens. With Gothic cathedrals, he actually replaced the traditional pointed arches with those highly efficient parabolic forms we just covered. And with vernacular farmhouses, he took their honest, practical use of local stone, timber, and iron and elevated it. He functioned almost like a medieval guild leader, collaborating with local artisans to bring local traditions into a bold new era.
Speaking of those artisans, we absolutely have to highlight this specific term right here, trencadís. It's a mosaic technique utilizing broken ceramic tiles to create this vibrant, durable, and super adaptable cladding for his complex curvilinear forms. By taking discarded, broken ceramics and meticulously piecing them together, Gaudí was practicing sustainable material reuse way before it was a trend, and in the process he created these breathtaking, kaleidoscopic surfaces that connected his futuristic shapes right back to local Catalan crafts.
Section 4. Barcelona's living masterpieces.
All right, so we've built the foundational concepts. Now let's take a grand tour of his executed works across the skyline. First stop, Casa Batlló. Now, this wasn't a ground-up build. It was actually a radical transformation of an existing, perfectly conventional building into something entirely mythical.
Just notice the organic features here. We have undulating, almost bone-like balconies, a central facade that literally resembles the textured skin of a dragon.
The flowing roof is adorned with colorful ceramic scales, and the irregularly shaped windows vividly evoke the eyes of mythical creatures. With these details, Gaudí transformed a mere shelter on the Passeig de Gràcia into a living, breathing work of art.
Just down the street, we find his mature residential project, Casa Milà. It's colloquially known by the locals as La Pedrera, which translates to the stone quarry, mostly because of its heavy, rugged appearance.
The exterior here is completely devoid of straight lines. It perfectly mimics naturally eroded rock formations. The wrought iron balconies are twisted to look like sea plants and seaweed. Inside, you have these curved interior courtyards that maximize natural organic flow and light. But my absolute favorite detail is up on the roof. He sculpted these surreal chimney stacks to look like fantastical helmeted warriors. He brilliantly blurred the lines between architecture and sculpture, turning highly functional ventilation shafts into playful artistry.
Next up, we move out of the city center to Park Güell. Now, this was originally envisioned as a utopian residential development, but it ultimately became a beloved public park that is deeply and intrinsically integrated right into a hillside topography.
You've got the iconic serpentine bench, curving effortlessly and completely clad in that vibrant trincadis mosaic we defined earlier. There are viaducts with tree-like columns that mimic natural rock formations, seamlessly blending right into the earth. You're greeted by a sweeping dragon stairway guarded by a mosaic creature, which then leads into a hippo-style room featuring a massive forest of 86 Doric columns. The architecture here just perfectly blends playful whimsy with its natural environment. It's a completely immersive experience.
And now, we build to the spectacular climax of our explainer, the project that truly defined his life and continues to define Barcelona today, the Sagrada Família. This is, without a doubt, his most iconic, monumental, and enduring project.
The organic features of this masterpiece are just astounding. On the exterior, the Nativity facade depicts biblical narratives entirely through natural flora and fauna. The towering spires reach upward, inspired directly by stalagmites and pine trees. Inside, the nave functions as a celestial forest, with those branching tree columns holding up the massive weight. And this brilliantly illustrates our earlier points about structural ingenuity. Those hyperbolic paraboloid ceiling vaults diffuse light exactly like a natural canopy. Honestly, stepping into that nave feels exactly like stepping into a deeply reverent spiritual forest.
Which brings us to our final section, the divine blueprint.
To truly understand Gaudí, we have to understand the intense, devout Catholic faith that drove his underlying purpose. He famously stated, "Architecture is a form of divine expression, a means of glorifying God through the emulation of his creation." For Gaudí, complex geometry wasn't just some abstract mathematical exercise. It was the divinely ordained underlying law of the universe. He firmly believed that by understanding nature, he was literally deciphering God's own design.
So, let's summarize this incredible synthesis of architecture and spirit. Gaudí completely rejected artificial forms in favor of creations that appear to grow organically straight out from the earth. He pursued an absolute harmony between the building, its environment, and the spiritual realm. In fact, he treated the intense labor of construction and design as a direct devotional act. Ultimately, he created what are basically visual sermons in stone that celebrate both cultural heritage and divine order. His masterworks are not just pretty buildings. They're a deep, empirical pursuit of truth, beautifully blending art, science, and a profound philosophical worldview.
So, I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. If nature is the ultimate, most efficient architect, how much more resilient and beautiful could our modern cities be if we built them to mimic the living world around us? It really makes you look at your own built environment with a renewed sense of curiosity, doesn't it? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and remember to keep observing that fascinating world around you.